I'm now pleased to be joined by Barnaby Raine, the journalist and historian. Barnaby, thank you for coming in. I'm sure you understand why Armistice Day is a very special day, that it's one where the war dead are commemorated. Now, I'm a great believer in freedom of speech, that people have the right to protest. But isn't it wise not to protest on a day that is held aside for something special?
Yeah, well, the special thing known as peace, the thing that's being protested for, right? And you're the say, oh, it commemorates war dead, and also says, you know, maybe it's a bad thing that they died. That's part of the whole point of the Armistice Day, is to celebrate the fact that there was a day where we had peace. And then Remembrance Day, say, wasn't it bad that all of those soldiers died at the behest of their own governments? Which would lend the idea that a peaceful march for peace and for a ceasefire, doesn't that sound like something like converging interests there somewhat, Jacob?
Due respect, Jacob, I don't think you're a great believer in freedom of speech or that you understand much about Armistice Day. It's literally called Armistice Day and we're marching for an armistice. So ask yourself this question. Who are the people who better represent the traditions of Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon? Who are the people who better represent the traditions of horror at the carnage of war? Is it a government that is funding and supporting a state that has murdered over 10,000 people now in Gaza, including 4,000 children? Or is it those of us who will pour onto the streets from every community across Britain to say that we want the massacre to stop?
Well, first of all,
I do like that he brings up Wilfred Owen, who explicitly, in his writing, talks about how people are, when they go to war, it's at the behest of their own governments, right? It's for the country rather than for the utilitarian ends that's being caused there, right? And I think that's a really interesting point there, because that nicely dovetails into this conflict between the state of Israel and like the non-state that is currently Palestine, and how, you know, it's about country versus country rather than the actual civilian populations, and of course the military populations who die in search of territorial gains.
You're taking the Hamas figures, which we know are unreliable, and that they've exaggerated some of the figures for...
If they're so unreliable, Jacob, why is the Israeli government posting pictures and giving us updates on how many people that they've killed? Weirdly, those numbers seem to align quite well with the Gaza Health Ministry. And why, indeed, would they be celebrating all of these dead civilians? I wonder why. A real head-scratcher in it, chat.
For their own propaganda purposes.
Jacob, every single figure released by the Gaza Health Ministry has an Israeli-issued ID number attached to it, Jacob. Are you saying those figures aren't true?
The Gaza Health Ministry is part of the Hamas state. It's a
Jacob,
Hamas
state. They have an Israeli-issued ID number attached to them. Did you know that?
The figures that are coming out of Hamas are propaganda.
Did you know they have an Israeli-issued ID?
Incredible. He could say, well, actually, no, the figures that are coming out, which have been ratified by their own Israeli ID numbers and also being celebrated currently by the Israeli state, they're propaganda, right? But all of the random nonsense stories that we've all heard that are literally propaganda coming out of the state of Israel, the one whose Twitter account is currently posting through it, no, that's not propaganda. That's just like heartfelt stories meant to touch the cockles of your heart so that you support the right team in this war.
They are part of the Hamas state. That's the key point. The Israeli number is an irrelevance. But let's get on to what.
Every single name being released is a verified name, and we've seen pictures of hundreds, sometimes thousands of people.
Let's start with how this began.
When their homes were bombed, when their hospitals were bombed,
and the head of the UN points out that Hamas is using people as human shields. So terrorists are high.
Interesting. As soon as he gets called out on the point that he's making here, when we all know, right, that the Gaza Health Ministry's figures are pretty reliable. Israel are relying on them. There are the numbers, and of course the numbers have already been confirmed as being reliable in previous conflicts as well. He has to move on to a different point. Well, actually, what are the human shields, right? Which of course is very, you know, there's plenty of contention over the human shields issue, but even then, regardless of the human shields issue, Israel still shouldn't be targeting refugee camps and hospitals, which they have already been doing and have given no evidence as to the necessity of targeting those places. They have shown us their own mock-up videos of the supposed underground lair underneath Al-Shifa, but no actual real intelligence. The only intelligence they have is like a singular hole next to Al-Shifa, which has already been debunked by Al Jazeera anyway.
Hiding behind children, the elderly and the unwell. And these terrorists...
Are you really okay with this?
With terrorists? Of course I'm not okay with terrorists using human shields. It's disgraceful. It's wicked.
Are you really okay with the bombing of a refugee camp?
Human shields are being used by Hamas.
Just answer the question, because we're...
One Hamas officer was in that refugee camp, according to the IDF. And that was their justification for turning it into smithereens. We've all seen the pictures. I'm not going to reproduce them for you now. We've all seen the pictures of what Jabalia looked like after the airstrike. That does not look like a precision strike to me. I'll say that for one thing, Jacob. I do not think that that is justified. I do not think that that is justified. But of course, these people, they bemoan, and rightly so, the deaths of however many people on from October the 7th. But any other person who dies in Palestine is just collateral damage. And that's because, as far as Jacob is concerned, white is right.
On the streets because we're not okay with it. Are you okay with the bombing of a refugee
You're
camp?
on the streets supporting, giving succour to people who carried out the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Are you okay with that? That's where it started.
We're on the streets to oppose the bombing
No, it started in 1948, Jacob.
of refugee camps, hospitals, homes,
Where,
schools. Jacob,
where did this start?
Well, it started in 1948 with the ethnic cleansing of 700,000 Palestinians.
True.
When
This
people left-
started on the 7th
No,
of
it didn't,
October
Jacob. It
with the
started with the
murder
cleansing
of
of 700,000
1,300 people and babies being beheaded. You're justifying that.
No evidence of this, by the way.
Jacob, there are 2.2. Of course not.
Okay, so will you
Jacob,
criticise Hamas as terrorists?
Listen. I want the violence to end. Here's how the violence can end. There are 2.2 million people penned into an open-air prison in Gaza. The significant majority of those people are not from Gaza. They're refugees who were ethnically cleansed from their homes in 1948. Now, I know that the people you admire are fine with that. Winston Churchill said he didn't mind when a superior race displaced an inferior one.
No.
That's how he talked about what happened in Palestine. But some of us feel from all over Britain...
Most of the people... You've had plenty of time.
No, he's not had plenty of time. And have you not noticed how we're 3 minutes in and Jacob Rees-Mogg has spent the entirety of this debate, if you can even call it that really and truly, just continually talking over Barnaby whenever he makes a salient point that might counteract Jacob's Western narrative on this?
Most of the people living in Israel have had to go there fleeing persecution where they lived, and mainly persecution.
They didn't have to go to somebody else's house. I think it is fine that people might want to immigrate to somewhere else to escape the persecution that they were fearing somewhere else. I think that's fine, as long as everybody who are of the place that you're immigrating to is absolutely fine with you doing so. What's different is leaving Europe and then forming militia groups who go to Palestinian towns in Palestine and then force out all the people at gunpoint and steal all of their houses, forcing them to become refugees, and then 75 years down the line, having them penned in an open-air prison, which you won't let them leave from, and then you besiege as soon as you feel the blowback that comes from the continued occupation of those lands that aren't yours. Maybe that's just me, though. Maybe I'm just a bit of a stick in the mud on these things.
Persecution in the Middle East.
No, actually, that's not true.
They're mainly Sephardi Jews.
Some of my family members who live in Israel came from Europe.
Yes, but the majority didn't. The majority came from the Middle East.
Do you know why my family went to Israel, Jacob?
No, the majority of Israel are Ashkenazi.
It's because white Christian Europeans who believed in tradition and hierarchy spent 2,000 years excluding and then massacring us. So I will take no lectures from white Christian Europeans who believe in order and hierarchy about anti-Semitism. Just because people like you spent thousands of years murdering us, I don't think Palestinians
people like me did not do that. Actually, you can't.
Yes, they did, right? It was explicitly the Christian countries in Europe, under explicit Christian terms, who did that. It was the Christians who forced Jews into usury in Europe because it was against Christian law at the time, right? It was Christians who did that, and we all know that Jacob is an incredibly staunch Christian as well.
You can't blame me.
White Christian
you
Europe
can't blame me for things that have nothing to do with me.
Do you know why I do? Do you know why I do? Because the same logic that says that some life is worthwhile and other lives aren't. That logic that for centuries
all life is valuable. All life is valuable. But
now,
unless, of course, you're a Palestinian child who happens to be within JDAM range or JDAM explosion range of a Hamas officer, or someone that the Israeli Air Force suspect to be a Hamas officer. Again, I would like to point out, I've mentioned this a lot of times, there have been 11,000 airstrikes by Israel during this conflict, and only 1,000 Hamas officers have been killed. So either they're bombing indiscriminately, which they've already told you that they're going to do. Their focus, as Daniel Hagari had said, is on damage and not accuracy. They've already said they want to annex the territory. They want Gaza to be smaller. They want the Arabs to lose land. They already have plenty of plans showing that they want to ensure that Greater Israel becomes reality, that the Gaza Strip and indeed the Palestinian territories in the West Bank, where they are murdering civilians with complete impunity, at no condemnation from the West whatsoever, right, with complete impunity, as I mentioned, none of these things ever get a look in, of course. Because they do not care about the lives of Palestinians, and neither does Jacob Rees-Mogg. All he believes in is might makes right. That's it. Might makes right, and white makes right. The only two things, they're the only things that are going on in Jacob Rees-Mogg's head right now.
Surely that same logic is meted out to Palestinians.
Surely the state of Israel, has the right to defend itself.
Palestinians see, just from canard to canard, right? He cannot interact with any of Barnaby's real arguments. So it has to be, oh well, the figures are wrong. Oh well, what about October the 7th? Oh well, what about this thing? Oh well, what about Israel's right to defend itself? Do you condone Hamas? It's just continual shifting of goalposts when he realizes that Barnaby has points that he cannot respond to properly. Obviously, I can't really call this a debate. I won't even title this video later as Barnaby winning a debate because nothing's happened here. All that's happened is that Barnaby's tried to articulate history to a man who clearly knows nothing, which we know that he knows nothing because he has to read Latin books to quote to make himself look smarter than he is. And when Jacob Rees-Mogg realizes that he's losing, he just talks over and then moves from point to point and shifts the goalposts.
Who are ethnically cleansed to pay for Europe's...
But they're not ethnically cleansed. This just isn't true. They're not ethnically cleansed.
What do you think the evacuation order was? What do you think all of the plans that Likud and the far-right parties that are its allies in the Knesset have drawn up these plans for Greater Israel and are using this explicitly to try and annex territory? They've said they want to annex territory. Well, by trying to get rid of all of the people of one race so that you can annex the territory and replace them with people of a different race, that's literally the definition of ethnic cleansing.
Why is Gaza one of the most densely populated places in the world?
The Israeli state is trying to defend itself following an appalling attack.
Why is
it's trying to get terrorists, and these terrorists are using...
See, all it is just it has a right to defend itself. Is there any specific way it should defend itself? I'm not going to make any prescriptions on that, but it does have the right to defend itself. And it doesn't matter how many Palestinian children have to die, have to be blown to bits by Israeli bombing campaigns, no matter how many houses have to get destroyed, no matter indeed how much territory gets annexed, because all of those war crimes, all of the completely indiscriminate breakings of international law that Israel engages in, all of that can be covered and can be hand-waved away by the statement Israel has the right to defend itself.
Human shields to protect themselves. That's the thing that you ought to be condemning.
Repeatedly, the Israeli state has made claims about human shields, which have been exposed by
and now accepted by the United Nations. The head of the United Nations, we had on a clip 10 minutes ago with the head of the United Nations saying human shields were being used. So are you now saying he's lying?
I just don't understand why you're kind of visibly happy at the ability to justify the murder of enormous numbers of innocent people. The IDF's headquarters is in a residential neighborhood in Tel Aviv. According to any definition that Israel uses, that means Israel uses human shields. It doesn't mean...
Nobody wants innocent people to be killed.
Nobody wants innocent people to be killed. So do you think Britain should stop funding and supporting it?
Except Hamas wants innocent people to be killed. Hamas kills...
Both IDF and Hamas want innocent people to be killed. Both of them do things indiscriminately. Both of them engage in what can only be described as ethno-nationalist cleansing of the other. They both want each other gone, wiped from the face of the Levant, right? Both of them have identical ideologies with regard to this. There is no difference between Hamas and the IDF. None whatsoever.
The people sending weapons to the Israeli state, which has killed 4,000 children. Your government is, so do you support it?
Hamas is the one that killed innocent people and killed babies deliberately.
Yes, so does the IDF.
Children, Jacob.
Deliberately. So Hamas goes out and kills as a matter...
What do you think the phrase, "we are focusing on damage, not precision," mean to you, Jacob? When you know that they're deliberately not caring on being precise in who they kill, they're happy to inflict as much damage as possible, invariably, in one of the most densely packed places in the world, of which half the population is children, that indiscriminate and inaccurate bombing, which they've admitted that they want to do, and they are focusing on doing, will invariably kill children. I don't know about you, but to me, Jacob, that means deliberately killing children. Don't know about anybody else. Maybe that's just me.
Of policy, innocent people, then they hide behind innocent people to avoid justice. That's what you're defending.
Do you know what I want? I'm a Jew, right? I want to be able to go and pray at the Western Wall, and I want to be able to pray there next to my Palestinian friends, Muslims and Christians, in peace and freedom. It's not possible. I don't want to pray under a gun that occupies and oppresses the indigenous people of Palestine. I don't want to pray. I don't want to go to parties, as people went to parties on October the 7th, 5 miles away from an open-air prison in which 2.2 million people are penned in without access to sufficient food and water.
So,
I don't want that status quo. I want
okay, I understand that. So are you therefore willing to condemn the actions on the 7th of October?
I want a world...
Chat. Do you condemn Hamas? I wonder if Barnaby Raine condemns Hamas. I wonder.
where it doesn't happen.
No, so are you willing to condemn it, or are you in fact sitting here justifying it?
Of course I'm not justifying
So you're willing to condemn it?
Analysis is not justification. But second of all, I will go back to the point I made when we were watching Loki, right? What would it matter? Who cares? Right? What would it matter if I sat in front of you and condemned Hamas? What would that do? Would that bring dead Israelis back to life? Would that bring dead Palestinians back to life? Would that fix the decades-long conflict in the Middle East? Would that do anything to help anything? Or are indeed you far more focused, amusingly as a right-winger, on virtue signalling and gesture politics, which they keep telling us that they hate. They hate virtue signalling, yet they want everything to be about virtual signals, right? They want you to condemn Hamas. That's all they care about. They want you to say the words. They want you to virtue signal about how bad you think Hamas's actions are. I don't care. I literally do not care. What I care about is actual material solutions to the problems that we have. I care about fixing the issues of continual conflict in the Middle East. I want to ensure the Palestinians live full and fruitful and meaningful lives in the land of their birth, and who do not have to live penned in an open-air prison, in refugee camps, specifically because the government that ethnically cleansed them does not want them to have the right to return. I want to fix all of those things. Whether or not I condemn Hamas, whether I condemn the State of Israel, whether I condemn the actions of the IDF, whether I condemn any of this, makes no difference whatsoever. It literally means nothing, right? But these people care far more about the potential for other people to virtue signal in the way that they want them to, than they care about anyone's actual real lives, right? No amount of them saying all human life is sacred matters at all unless they show us what they will materially do to actually make those lives matter. And that is the essence of conservative ideology. The essence of conservative ideology is making the statement that life matters and then taking zero material steps to achieve those ends in the first place. Just like with the homelessness policy from Suella Braverman, where you can just justify leaving people to die on the street if they haven't made the wrong lifestyle choices because who is not the role of the state or whatever. Or when it comes to supporting the State of Israel, when it blows children to smithereens because you don't care about materially solving these issues, all you care about is the virtue signal. And that's what the virtue signal is. Well, Israel has a right to defend itself. That's just a virtue signal as well. Just look at me, I support the correct team in my mind. Because unless you actually solve the Israel-Palestine problem, unless you actually solve the issue of what happens under occupation, October the 7th will happen again. Ismail Haniyeh has said as much himself. And while you say we may not want to negotiate with terrorists, his position is one that, as far as he would be concerned, he's been forced into. And the material conditions will dictate that whether or not you kill every Hamas individual who is existing on the ground at the moment, they will be able to recruit more. You are not going to be able to deal with the issue through further escalation of conflict. That will not create the new state that needs to exist to be able to ensure peace between the Palestinian and the Israeli people. That will not be helped by continual saber rattling, continual aerial bombardment, and continual increase in hostilities. The only people that this serves are Haniyeh and Netanyahu, two people whose only goal is the ethnic cleansing of the other. That's it. And of course, that doesn't matter to Jacob because he's too busy prevaricating, too busy making himself look like he's in the right than he is about finding solutions. Because solutions would be something that he would have to then stick to if it went wrong. And he doesn't want to do that. He just wants to be on the right team.
As an
act of terrorism.
Of course I'm not justifying it.
And is a state entitled to defend itself against an act of terrorism?
Let me just ask the question back to you. Are you willing to condemn the murder of 10,000 people, including 4,000 children, armed and supported by the British state, of whose parliament you are a member?
I support the Israeli state's right to defend itself against the attacks on innocent...
Again, just canards over and over and over again. Just... They have a right to defend themselves. No explanation of what that might entail or what is and is not justifiable in terms of self-defense. Just, I'm going to say they can do self-defense, and then I'm going to leave it up to you to interpret what that means, right? So I can hand-wave away war crimes. I can hand-wave away violations of international law. He's literally hand-waving away in front of you, chat, the murder of 4,000 children, right? 4,000 children dead, blown to smithereens, crushed under rubble. right? In body parts strewn about the Gaza Strip. That's what those children are right now. And he is hand-waving it away with a very simple phrase of Israel has a right to defend itself. Because clearly those children's lives are worth less than this miscellaneous and nebulous belief in the state of Israel to defend itself.
Civilians,
Do you support the
which you are
displacement?
not being clear about condemning.
Do you support the displacement of 300 children in recent weeks in the West Bank by armed Israeli settlers
are you
supported by the
willing?
British state?
Are
Do
you
support
willing
that?
to condemn this attack on the 7th
What
of
am I going to
October?
condemn? I don't want anyone
You're
to
not.
die.
I'm
I
afraid
don't want
Barnaby
anyone to
isn't
die.
willing to
Jacob,
attack.
I don't want
And see, that's what the canards end up. That's where we end up. Just, oh, well, you've not condemned Hamas. You may have some interesting points. You may have actual material solutions to the problems that we're seeing. You may indeed be someone with loads of knowledge of the history. But unfortunately, you've not said the magic words, I condemn Hamas. Therefore, all of your opinions can be completely ignored, even though it means nothing. It's completely meaningless. And of course, at no point did Jacob Rees-Mogg ever engage with any of Barnaby's points. So it would be unrealistic for me to describe this as any kind of debate. But what it was a really interesting look into the conservative ideology, into the right-wing ideology in terms of geopolitics and what matters in the sanctity of life and the sanctity of existence, because they refuse to actually hold any standards at all. All they care about is the right team. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.